Welcome to the Jordan School District Board of Education. This is our study session. It is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. We are in the JATC South Building, and we have board members Barnett, Dean, Richards, George, Miller, and Robinson here. Mr. Dunford is on his way. He had a work meeting until 4, so he'll be joining us shortly. We also have Dr. Godfrey, Dr. Anderson, Mr. Larson, and Mr. Van Komen with us. Our first study session item is going to be continued discussion on our board ends policy 404, safety and security. And as a board, we've talked about this a few times. We've made a few changes to that. And our last direction was to Dr. Godfrey to bring back some suggestions. And I believe those are attached to board docs. So, Nikki, do you want to say anything at the beginning of this?
Summary. I'll just refresh your memory that when we left off, we were wondering how we could quantify data assessments for physical and emotional safety at schools. And so Dr. Godfrey and his team of magicians have put together some ideas, and we'll just turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. We updated the draft. The draft, for those listening in, includes adding information under A of ENDS 404, Safety and Security, to read timely communication to families coordinated with police if an emergency should occur. And sometimes communication that seems like it obviously should happen does not, as we coordinate with police, because we want to be sure that we're not interfering with their processes. And then the yearly communications to parents containing safety procedures and protocol. So those are the added communication components. And then the emotionally safe environment for schools shall be measured and assessed by, and we've added 4 measures there. Data from early warning systems for student interventions. That's currently the Panorama dashboard. Description of suicide, bullying, and violence prevention efforts. Data from Skyward behavior logs and school counselor student visit data. Now, there was also a request from the board to have quarterly reports. And so I've put that language in here. Receive quarterly reports on safety school drills and incidents, as well as anecdotal reports of efforts to establish an emotionally safe environment. And so we've also posted examples of that online here. So let me pull that up. On the emergency reporting, I appreciate the board's question about how much effort this will take, and auxiliary services working their magic, as Ms. George put it, have created Google Docs that allow for that report to be updated automatically. So anytime there's a drill reported or anytime there's an incident reported, it automatically uploads to this Google Doc that we'll then provide to you every quarter. And that will allow us to kind of track the trends and make sure those drills are happening. Those reports were already happening with auxiliary services, but they've updated the form to include reports of incidents so that every incident is reported. And this is an example. If this is not what you're looking for, this is a draft so that we can talk about how we can better meet that need and meet that requirement. The other document that's posted is a list of anecdotal evidence from the Student Services Department. Some very stirring anecdotal evidence. Sorry, pulling that up. And that's something that can easily be done. Just some examples, not a whole overview of everything that happens. But if you look, there are students who are helped through all kinds of difficult personal situations, personal struggles, feeling that they weren't connected in school, dealing with grief. So just various issues that students deal with. Those are some great examples of the many wonderful things that are being done to help support our students by student services and in our schools and through the structures and resources that you've made available. So those are some examples of what that quarterly report could look like, and a draft of the policy intended to reflect the board discussion. I apologize for not having these posted before today. Any initial reactions to any of that? And I can give you time to go over it too, because it was not posted not long ago.
What is the time involved in these reports?
Doesn't take long. There's so much going on that it's, I haven't suggested this specifically, but I would think that Travis could even in a staff meeting say, hey, let's each type up an example of what's been happening and send it. Because it's anecdotal instead of comprehensive, that information is easy to come up with. It's just quick stories about some of the things that we're dealing with and that we're helping with. And the other, like I said, the Google report just populates on its own, so we can just pull the most recent since our last report and post that. So I don't think it's too labor intensive, and that's part of what we were testing too, is how hard is it to do this, and I think it's reasonable. If we were looking for more than anecdotal evidence from student services, I think that would be more difficult. But being able to pull some stories that are examples of what's happening out there, I think can be done easily on a quarterly basis.
Well, there's a form. It looks like that each school will fill out whenever they go through some kind of a drill, right?
A drill or an incident, yes.
Yeah. And then the other document gathers all those individual forms and puts them in a
Yes.
kind of a summary form. Is that the idea?
Yes, and I didn't reference the school form, but that's I have included a copy of that so that you can see what schools fill out, what they submit. Populates that Google document automatically. Another reason for me to be a big fan of Google Docs.
This report, I mean, this is 1 week, and it's a whole page.
Yeah, would you like a summary rather than the full thing? Because
Just say there's a lot going
I
on
think it shows
in our
that we're
schools.
that we're doing a lot of stuff.
Yes,
And
These are
then-
examples, like I said. It's
August
just
21 to 24.
So these items would be posted to board docs for our review, not necessarily like a discussion item at
Not-
meetings.
well, however you would like to have me, whatever format you'd like that in.
I love this. I think it's so great. I just want to always ask myself the why, because I don't want to make even a little extra work if it's not producing a result. And I love reading the anecdotal evidence. Those are touching stories. And I'm wondering if you feel like this will lead us to say, here's a hole that we're missing. Here's somewhere that we need to make sure we address. Is that the why here, and do you feel like this accomplishes that?
For me, the why is, first of all, it's a reminder of the concrete things that are happening out there as opposed to the abstract concepts around safety and security. So it kind of grounds us to what's happening day to day, which I think is important. And the other is for us to recognize some patterns, particularly when it comes to physical safety, but also perhaps look at those individual anecdotes and say, is there something else that we need resource-wise, or something else that we need to do, or, wow, I'm glad that we provided that resource. So I think it's reinforcement for some things we've done, and maybe we'll open a discussion about other things we could do. So even if it isn't an agenda item, it may spark that with a board member, and we can talk more about a particular situation or a trend.
That I think that's great, and I would just say in those staff meetings where this is being written, I hope that they will feel candid. That if they're like, this happened and we didn't have the resource we needed, this would have helped us, that they'll also feel free to mention that to us.
I was specific in asking for stories along those lines going forward as well. Just, hey, this was a moment where we wish things had gone a little differently. And it's the reason that we left the debrief notes on that report on safety and security as well. So we're not scrubbing it, scrubbing the detail off of that. We're leaving some of the questions on there about what they can do better. Clarifying language, I think, was one of those in case of emergency. So I think that's an important point that we need to continue to follow up on is, are we not just sharing the glowing stories of victory, but are we also talking about areas where we felt like we could have done better or needed more resources or greater clarity?
And I think we can learn from both. I don't want to downplay this celebration,
No.
but I just don't want them to ever feel like, oh, I probably better not mention something.
Yeah.
We can take it.
No, I appreciate that, and I agree.
On the evidence of the above will be provided through multiple means. We talk about the safety and security for physical safety, and there's A through H listed there. Would this emergency drill information fit somewhere in the A through H, because it is dealing with physical safety, not the emotional safety, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I added it to the end, but I think putting it in the list does make sense.
1G is the drills.
1G, end of year drill reporting from schools.
Just pulling that back up. I had the other document up here.
And then I may have asked this in previous meetings, but this A through H stuff, all these inspections and annual reports, is there ever a time where we as a board see these reports, maybe in closed session? I think we talked about not wanting the general public to see this type of information because it's sensitive. Is there ever a time where we look at this and we review it and make sure we're in compliance, or is this something done by staff?
It's something done by staff. I'd be happy to make arrangements if the board would like to do that differently. So
Or
I'm sure we could do that in closed session.
so after staff looks at it, if they identify any problems, are we notified at that point as a board, or do we not ever get involved in this as a board?
I have provided evidence. I've referenced this, not like firsthand evidence. I haven't provided the reports themselves, but I've reported on physical safety. But if the board chooses to have more direct involvement in this, we can arrange for that. But
Yeah.
if there's a problem, it's been addressed by the department, and they work back and forth with various entities as that
Yeah.
reporting happens.
I'm not necessarily asking for more input. I was just curious how we make sure this is happening.
The board has not been involved directly in that.
Okay.
So these are our ends policies, and so at the end of the year we get an annual report on how the district's done on the ends policies. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the past, this goes back a few years, we got a big binder and it had all of these things in them. And then when Dr. Godfrey came along, we said, we don't need everything. Just pick some from each area. So I think that's, as a board, something that we need to decide. Do we want to see all these because we can in our annual report? Or are we okay just having them pick some areas to share with us?
It was a big full binder.
Yeah.
Packed.
I'd forgotten that. That's a really good point. So it was kind of an anecdotal evidence approach where pick one example of each item that you're responsible for. You don't have to show everything, just show us one example of each item. But we can do that however you'd like to do it as a board.
I don't think I need a binder, but I am curious if we need to look at the wording on letter C if we're not asking for it. Because right now it says evidence will be provided. So,
Where are you looking?
letter C in
On-
the policy.
I overheard Mr. Larson with a good suggestion there.
I like that.
Evidence of the above will be provided as requested. May be requested through multiple means, and then as a board, we can request any of these reports to be included.
I like that.
I know that we don't sit like on this safety. I don't know that it was a committee, but we used to have a board member who sat in a safety meeting. And so that was my role last year. And so I naturally saw some of those reports. And I do think it was useful. But now that we're not there, I don't know if we'll ever see something like that.
So did that put you in a position to be able to see things and then know if we need to address it as a board?
For me, it was helpful to be able to say, this is where we're measuring, and you could see holes when not that you could see holes, but when you see an assessment, you can see how you scored in each area. And so I found it helpful, but
I personally am fine with getting a report from Dr. Godfrey. I don't need to see the report. Just don't.
I like the idea of adding evidence of the above. Oh, let's see, because Dr. Godfrey should be receiving all these, or at least his staff measuring and assessing in these ways. But evidence of the above will be provided to the board, or may be requested by the board. Something along that lines.
and then this at least gives us the knowledge of what to request if we.
Yes, if we have a concern, we say,
Can we put members of the board? I don't know that, if I want it, I don't know, do I have to come to the whole board and ask permission to get it, or can I just individually get it?
that is a good question. I think since it's part of the ends policies, that you would just be able to request that as a board, but I think a best practice would be if one board member requests it, it gets sent to all of them. So that we all have that information.
Yeah.
About the safety committee.
I think I'm comfortable with the direction we're going,
Okay.
that it's available as requested. And you do give us intermittent updates as things happen. So that might trigger us to say, oh, I'd love to look at that.
Sure. So would you like me to change the language to say may be requested by a board member?
Yeah, just by letter
Change.
C.
Okay.
Evidence will be provided through multiple means and may be requested by a board member.
Or maybe will be provided at the request of a board member through multiple means.
Yeah. I'm not. Oh, and welcome, Mr. Dunford. He has now joined us for the record. Okay, let's go to C2. Is everyone okay with the 4 additions of E, F, G, and H?
Just have a question. So some of this seems like it could be protected information. Is that all information that's available to board members for their request?
Yeah, we can make that available without associating it with particular individuals. Just, you know,
So when it's like a school counselor student visit data would say like, this proportion of students have had a visit with a counselor, not like, here's
Right.
what happened in my session with Molly.
right.
Okay,
And
I
this,
did that wrong.
last year we had this number of student visits, and this year we have this number of average student visits, and this percentage of students had a visit, and those more statistical than and broad than specific.
Okay, any other questions or changes on 2D, E, F, oh, sorry, E, F, G, and H? Okay, and then what about letter D? Quarterly reports on school safety drills and incidents, as well as the anecdotal report.
As long as it's not too labor intensive. And when will the board report annually to the community? Does that already happen?
I mean, I've typically viewed that as the end of year report that Dr. Godfrey gives a public report on how we meet the ends policies. I've viewed that as the annual report, but do we have something different in mind?
I don't know. I feel like that's Dr. Godfrey's report annually. Do we want to change that? The superintendent will report annually?
I have a question. So when we receive these quarterly reports, it'll be at a public board meeting? And because if it is, then it seems like that could be to the community that is interested in it. Or are we looking at a postcard or an email, or is it to the whole community, or is it something that interested parties could know, oh, this is reported on quarterly, I'm interested in it, I'm going to tune into this board meeting to hear about this quarterly security report? Am I making sense in what I'm saying?
Goes back to my question of will there actually be discussion, or will these reports just be attached to a consent agenda? Like, could they follow that? If they wanted to, it might not ever be specifically spoken of.
Any recommendations?
Are those reports appropriate to put on the public board docs?
I would. It would be less. There would be less candor on a public report, because the stories I just shared with you could be identifiable. Someone could say, "Oh, wait, I think I know who that was." So it would change the nature of the report if you wanted them to be publicly available, and we can arrange that if you prefer.
So I've done some studying on school safety, and it's a topic of the NSBA, some of the sessions I went and such, and I think at least quarterly the board ought to have a discussion. I prefer in closed session on where we are, and maybe semi-annually publicly where we are. And of course that information is different. As we've mentioned a couple times, safety is protected under closed sessions in some incidences, but the problem is if it's not scheduled, we tend to bring this issue up after some kind of an emergency. And we're really not in a position to making effective changes in the midst of conflict, and so just like mental health was an issue that we found out later that it should be quarterly also on our agendas. I would prefer that. And I'm okay with quarterly also publicly, but I just want this to be a topic, a continual topic to be talking about.
So you would say quarterly
I think quarterly
In
closed.
closed session under safety and security.
And then at least maybe semi-annually to, like when we brought the West Jordan Police or Fire chief here, I think that was really good. So we could do things like that, or have the safety committee come and report to us of some things that they're doing, you know, those kinds of things. But I just would like it to be a continual topic.
I agree. I'm just wondering if I would love to make sure that that's scheduled so it doesn't accidentally just escape. And I'm curious if we want it to begin with the board will report annually. Is it that the board's report? Or are we receiving that report?
Or are we holding a public meeting at least once a year to receive that report?
Yeah. Well, we're receiving it quarterly, right? According to the way D reads. We'll receive quarterly reports and then we report to the public annually.
I think saying the board will report annually is if we're holding it in a board meeting, like the time we did have this safety discussion with our police officers here. I mean, we weren't presenting the report, but we were holding it in our board meeting. So I think
Okay, that makes sense.
that is the board reporting, but, you know.
Well, and then keep in mind, these are our ends reports. This, ends policy, excuse me. So really it belongs to us. So I think that sounds fine.
So do we want to say the board will, or do we want to say the superintendent will report to the board?
I think it's okay to say the board will, given the way that you just phrased it. We're hosting that topic at least annually.
It's on our agenda.
So I'm okay with everything else, just a slight alteration to C.
Okay, so the way it's written, the board will receive a quarterly annual report on our safety and security in closed session, and then we will have an agenda item annually to report on physical and mental safety of students. It will be in our public meeting, so the community can be aware of that. Mr. Robinson's proposed semi-annually. Any thoughts on that?
I don't think this limits us on being able to speak about it more than once, but it sets a minimum, right? Or not a ceiling.
Okay, raise your hand if you're okay with annually. Anyone want semi-annual? Okay, we'll leave it as annual then, knowing that there is always the opportunity to bring it forward as an agenda item at any time. Okay, so is the wording on D okay? And C too, so all we'll change is the letter C, that first line. Are we okay if we bring this to study session with that change and then put it on the agenda to be voted on at our next meeting?
Yep.
Okay, question on continued discussions on ends policies. So our goal as a board was that we were going to spend the first bit of time in each of our study sessions, the non-general meeting study sessions on ends policies. We started with mission statement, decided to do a whole portrait of the graduate that will likely replace our mission statement. And then we talked about student achievement and decided that that might also change as we go through the portrait of graduate process. So first of all, just on the portrait of graduate process, and Dr. Godfrey, correct me if I'm wrong, but that staff is going through that RFP process right now, and we should have a bid at our next meeting? Okay. So we'll be rolling on that fairly soon. So we worked on our safety and security policy. We have customer service and employee empowerment. Are we okay moving ahead on one of those? And is there anyone in particular you'd like to discuss first? And it will just be a discussion. We don't have to make any changes to it at all, but we'll start with a discussion on whether or not we need to make changes to it.
I feel good about moving forward with one of those, either.
Okay. I mean, I've been debating it because portrait of a graduate could actually change all of our ends policies, but yet we're still like a year away from that. It wouldn't hurt us to continue to review them and be familiar with them, even if they are going to change. Okay, so employee empowerment is our next one. Do I have a volunteer to lead the discussion on that? Ms. George, you've done a great job on safety and security. Thank you.
Thank you. All reflected through the work of Dr. Godfrey and his group.
I volunteered for 401, so I'm going to stick with 401. I'll take it for the next year.
I don't remember who we had people down for these at one point in time. I don't remember who we had.
So it's E402 is the one we're thinking of,
402 is employee empowerment.
and that's the one we're talking about looking at next.
Yes.
I'll take it, I guess. I haven't done one.
Case.
What would be my responsibility here then?
Terrell took 403.
Oh, you have it
Marilyn
written down.
took 402.
I thought I did. I was
And I
thinking-
took 401.
Oh, so are you okay with that, Marilyn? Or would you like to hand that off to someone else?
Ryan wants to help you.
Have Brian sit in, yeah.
Okay.
So it'll just start, in our May meeting, it'll just start with a discussion where we review the policy and decide if we're happy with it as is or if we want to make any
Is
changes.
that the next study session?
Okay. Oops. Okay, our next agenda item is board priorities, and this is just a quick overview of where we're at with that. Our first priority was tackling ESP shortages, and our last meeting we got the extensive list of the targeted approach that's been done by superintendent and his staff on helping with the ESP shortages. We've got negotiations coming up where as a board we will be making decisions on that. Is there any other information anybody needs on ESP shortages or questions or concerns they have? Okay.
TEAC is also addressing that, and because of the virtual day, we weren't able to meet, so we will meet on the 18th. So we will be bringing back, hopefully, lots of ideas from teachers. Their assignment was to comment on the implementation of the changes that rolled into effect this year, as well as ideas that they have to solve the ESP shortages. They're the ones that are taking the brunt of it. So we'd like to hear from them.
Okay, good. That's a good reminder on that. We'll have that coming up soon then. Okay, our next priority was the building bond plan. And last time we talked about the housing continuum and updated that. That is attached to board docs. And we just got that attached this afternoon. So if you want to take a look at that.
I'm so sorry to backtrack, but we were just reading a little bit about some of the things in policy that we say that we'll monitor as a board, and some of those go back to the ESP process, right?
That's right.
So I just wanted to circle back and make sure that we receive those. It talks about having a comparison report to pay and benefits with nearby districts. I'm trying to remember the other one.
It's in our ends policies.
Yes. I was just trying to pull it up and wasn't fast enough.
Okay, it's E402. And then, so licensed employees is A2, classifieds is B, which that's one thing that needs to change since we don't call them classified anymore. Evidence through, so B2A, creating a competitive salary schedule, conducting comparison studies, conducting and reviewing the results of classified employee exit surveys, and conducting and reviewing the results of the bi-yearly contract classified employee survey. So is that all?
Yeah, that was, I just think that information, I mean, we've already set the standard that we'll review that, and it would be pertinent as we start talking about negotiations.
So Dr. Godfrey, is that all information you can get? And is the rest of the board interested in that data also?
All the data in 402B that you're, yeah.
402 B2.
I'd be interested in that.
And we can pull that together. Next time.
Back to us?
Next
Can
time.
you really?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Okay, anything else?
No, thank you. I'm sorry to go backwards.
Oh, that's great, thank you.
I was searching for the part of policy, so I didn't have to sound like a blundering idiot.
Okay, housing and enrollment continuum. Or actually alternative housing options. So what's attached to board docs reflects the changes that we made last time. Enough time to look at it?
Yeah, this reflects what I remember discussing.
Okay.
And we're okay to share that out now, right? Because the board's already voted on it and now it's updated. Okay.
There's draft on it, but I think we leave draft on a lot of our documents because they're always subject to change.
I can post another version that doesn't say draft, but I like your thinking. It kind of shows that
It's always a draft.
if it can change.
Okay, and then the next thing we need is an updated building plan that facilities committee is working on. Ms. Richards, do you have an update on that or potential time frame for when we can expect that?
Yeah, we meet again on May 9th. We have invited the student services staff, Caleb Olson, Travis Hamblin, and Scott Feston, and maybe one other, I can't remember. Is that, you'll be there? Okay, yeah, that's right, you were on the list. And they should have something for us then, and we'll discuss that very, very much in detail. That's our biggest agenda item for that day.
But the 9th or the 8th?
9th. I think it's a Monday, isn't it?
The 8th is a Monday.
Okay, then that's what it is.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Sorry.
Want to make sure I show up on the right day.
What does the building plan include? I mean, what, can you
Well,
tell me
we're
just what it
looking
is?
at hotspots. I think you remember the hotspot map that we had
Mhm.
given to us.
Yeah.
And just detailing that, number of students, things have kind of leveled out enrollment-wise a little bit. And also housing has kind of slowed. And so we're looking at all of those aspects in what we decide. Whether we need to go for a bond, whether, we, different options that we're looking at.
So
So-
kind of a,
You can drop the word whether. Question is when.
It's when, yeah.
So what the building plan is, it's a document. I can send you the most recent one that we have. But what we need is an updated version of that shows what schools we need and when we need them by.
Right. So we don't call it a 5-year plan any longer. We call it an ongoing plan, and that's what we're working on. So,
Based on enrollment growth,
correct.
this is when we're going to need a school, and this is the general area that we're going to need to open it in.
Right. And like I say, it involves housing, it involves, population, how it's shifting, just a lot of different details that we have to consider.
It was that report that led us to the flex building.
Right.
So it was that effort to say where are schools needed, the hottest spot, the most urgent need was the flex building. And so that's why we've been focusing on getting that building built.
Oh, that is it. Nice work.
If I may, Ms. Richards will also be looking at the permit priorities and wanted to talk about possible ways to improve or suggestions that might streamline the process for permit priorities in order to get them into Power School and things for the upcoming permit window. I know it's early, but we need to have that information hopefully by May or June finalized in order to start uploading it to Power School.
So potentially our May board meeting, you can bring us a recommended building plan and we can start working on it as a board too.
We'll have the ground level, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. That's good. And then just down the road, once we finalize and settle on what that building plan is, then finance committee will bring us options
Right.
of how we can pay for those schools.
With and without a bond.
Right.
This is what we can do with, and this is what we could do without.
Yeah. So that can be on finances committee to start pulling together, but we'll get the recommendation from facilities and decide on that as a board and then have finance bring their recommendations. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, anything else on board priorities then that you want to address? All right, next agenda item is a review of the National School Boards Association Conference. There are 4 board members and Dr. Godfrey and Mr. Larson that attended that last week. A lot of great sessions. A couple great keynotes, one not so great. Lisa liked that one though.
You're not so great.
Okay, I'm a liker, so I
She sees
usually
positive
like
in
stuff.
everything, and that is a good thing. All right, so reports. Who wants to go first? You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
It was kind of an interesting conference for me because the titles didn't always say what you're going to see. So I do want to thank Dr. Godfrey and our communication staff, Sandy Reescraft and Doug Flagart, for their great presentations. They did a great job. I heard some chatter among people after the fact, and I saw tons of people coming up for your autograph and stuff. But it was very informative about how we approach the media and how we communicate out with people. And Dr. Godfrey has done a wonderful job at this, and I just really appreciate him. The Supercast, if people are listening and haven't heard of the Supercast, where have you been? Start listening to those. And I've even ran into a couple other podcasts that people in the district are doing that I've found really, really useful and helpful. So thank you for that. And thanks for the ongoing national presence that people are watching our district with. But I did go to some classes that were not exactly what I expected, but maybe what I needed. So I went to one about like standardized testing, and it was like how real estate agents refer to our schools, and how most people just go to like niche or greatschools.com to see what our schools are like, and that we need to control that narrative. That if we could create something on our website, something like that that tells what our schools are, then and then let the real estate community know that, especially among the millennials, they said, which I thought this was interesting. Their number one place of where they like to buy is where good schools are. And so instead of letting these websites control the narrative of what our district's like, we should control it. So not what I expected. I thought it was going to be on standardized testing, but it wasn't. It's just basically the grades. Our testing doesn't tell the story. And so anyway, so that's something I think that we could work on. There was a really good one on blended learning. Obviously, you'll find me there. But it wasn't really on blended learning. So, but it was a lot on like how a lot of the things that I learned was how we could develop our portrait of the graduate. And they do like a TED Talk kind of thing within the district. I thought that was kind of really interesting. But also like just project-based ways of getting kids to kind of get engaged. So I went to one on electric buses, which was very interesting. And what else?
Is that the one that wasn't really all about electric buses?
No, this one actually was. I sat by with John
I went to
on
one
that.
of those too.
Yeah, I thought a lot of them were that way, but anyways, yeah, that's probably the long and short of my experience at NSBA. Not the very best NSBA I've ever been to, but obviously always is super well. I did go to one on school safety too, so, and that was very interesting. But yeah, I had less takeaways this time than maybe before. Might have had to do with getting sick, but
Or maybe you just know everything.
yeah, I know that's not the case. I know that's not the case, but I did think it was very interesting that sometimes you go to these classes thinking this is one I really want to know, and instead you get what you need to know instead of what you want to know. So.
Sure. I had a similar experience. It just seemed like the little sentence of information that we had didn't always describe what I imagined a class would be about. But I was surprised. I started out as well going to our own district presentation about managing the media during turbulent times, and was surprised when I walked away with pages of notes. I thought it was really insightful and helpful, even though I get to be around these people all the time. So it's an opportunity to hear from a different perspective. And one of the things that I took away from that is how important it is for us to have a protocol in place for what do you do when you're approached by the media. And I asked myself, do I know a protocol for that? And thought that might be something that would be wise for our board to have in place and for all of us to commonly know. The next,
Question on that.
oh yeah, please.
What are like some examples? You mean like someone just emails you from the KUTV News or something and asks for an interview? Is that?
Yeah. So it just said, have a protocol in place and make sure that your whole board is aware of it. And there probably is one and I'm just missing it, but I thought that would be a good conversation.
Something, especially after an election year when we have new board members, that we should have a discussion and have, Sandy come and
Yeah.
talk about what the protocol is if you get approached by media.
Yeah. Well, and there are just so many great tips that were different from the last time I heard that presentation. It felt like a new presentation to me, but really, really helpful. And one of the things that I think we have a masterful communications team is just knowing when to respond and when to just let it play itself out, and that was helpful. Then the next one that I went to was about developing effective questioning techniques for board members. And that one talked a lot about something I've already referenced in this meeting, so it must have been a good one, getting to the whys. So making sure that that's guiding all of our questions and all of our conversations is the why of a school board, I hope, is always student outcomes. I hope that that is our ultimate goal. And so as we frame all of our conversations around that, and I do feel like Portrait of a Graduate is a great way to help us train our whys. But being able to make sure that as we're asking questions that we're really getting the information that we need. And sometimes we don't ask that question, right? We were having a little lighthearted conversation while we waited at a restaurant the first night. And we had said, how long to be seated? And then when we sat down pretty quickly, and then we waited over an hour for our food to be brought to the table, we were like, oh, we asked the wrong question. We should have asked how long until we have food. We didn't want to know how long until we could sit down. We wanted to know how long until we eat. And I think that relates right back here, that being able to really be thoughtful about the agenda before the meeting so that we can come prepared with the questions we actually want answers to. Can be a powerful tool. The next one I went to, ironically, was the shortest. It was over in 20 minutes. And again, I took more than a page of notes. It was really interesting. It talked a little bit about curriculum adoption and the science of reading. And many of the sessions that I wound up in went back to that. So I'm so grateful for Dr. Godfrey's leadership in making that his top priority in our district, because it flows into every piece of a child's education. But the one piece that those who were with me have heard so many times, I'm sorry, but it has just stuck with me so much. They divided out readers into high reading ability and high knowledge, and then vice versa, low ability, low knowledge. Obviously, the best readers are high reading ability, high knowledge base. But the group that really interested me was the second group, and they were significantly higher than the third group. So I thought it would be high reading ability, low knowledge. I was wrong. It was high knowledge, low reading ability. And how important it is that the curriculum that we're presenting to children and to ourselves as board members is engaging, and that we understand the base knowledge needed to really create engagement. That kind of has, in my mind, brought up some other questions that I'll get to later, but here it talks a little bit about how curriculum is the equalizer. So children who hard straw. We don't have an impossible hill to climb. And I think that that can be a powerful approach for all of our schools, to see the good, to take a page from Ms. Dean's book and find the one funny joke in an hour of whoa, but to see the potential possibilities for students. So that was definitely an eye-opening session for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I went to several that talked about getting students involved in hearing student voices for board meetings, and I talked to the superintendent about that, and he already goes to different classes. It's not just the student body officers that have voice, and I really appreciated that. But then there was a class that it was called All Students Are Not Created Equal, and there was subtext to it about how boards have the ability, school boards have the ability to influence how well students do. And it was given by two researchers. What were their names? Ivan Lawrenson and William P. McGraw. And the first time, it was all about board self-assessment surveys. And, well, one in particular that they did a Montana study in 2013 where they looked at a lot of schools in Montana, well, school boards who self-assessed. And this is an ongoing study, like it started in 2013, and they've been doing it in Washington and I think in Idaho. And they were using data from their Washington data. And the board assessment, self-assessment survey, I think it has 96 questions in 5 different areas, and they wanted to see if there were things that school boards were doing according to these self-assessment surveys that were improving outcomes for different groups of students. And the groups of students they were looking at were Native American students, Black students, economically disadvantaged students, and Hispanic Latino students. And so they would look at school districts that had a high enough percentage of students in this group and were consistent enough with taking the self-assessment. And they identified, and then they looked there. This showed a couple of things, because there were districts where each group of students was doing average or above average. For instance, with the Black students, there were, I think, 4 out of the 8 districts where the Black students were doing at or above the district and state average in school, probably standardized testing. I don't know exactly how they were measuring this. And so that showed that they were able to. Like, that was just one of the findings, that this proves that these students can do just as well as everybody else. And then they looked at these districts. What are the school boards? They looked at their self-assessment, and they found that the question that these districts had in common was that the board had the attitude that every student can achieve. And that was the question that correlated with the Black student achievement. And I just really found this whole thing fascinating, because it was not the same for the economically disadvantaged students or the Hispanic Latino students or the Native American students. And I felt like it could be helpful for our board to self-assess every couple of years. So I think it would be a good discussion point. I also went to a really good class called Modeling Civility in Your School District. And this was, there was a conflict resolution team there, and also members of the Cody, Wyoming School Board, and they talked about how a few years ago their board was voting whether or not to let teachers bring firearms in to school. And of course, that's a very polarizing topic that could cause a lot of arguments, and there are a lot of strong opinions on all over that. And they just talked about how they were able to get their community to come together and discuss this. And a couple of the things were that, like Nikki was talking about, the why. A big thing is learning how to ask the bigger question that answers more than just the narrow question. Like finding what is the question that is not the fight question, but the true discussion, like what is at the root of what we all really want in this situation. And in one of, I think it was also in this, that there was another class I went to about, or another session where they talked about school board member and public relationships, and something that they talked about that I thought was really fun was this district, they have a coffee with trustees once a month, and I found out that some people call board members trustees, and so, but I thought that was kind of fun, where just I think 3 board members would just go to the same coffee shop each at the same time every month, and then any members of the community that just wanted to talk to them or hear what was going on in the school board, or very importantly, the trustees or the board members mostly just listened to what the people came and said to them. So I felt like it was very helpful. There were a lot of really, really great ideas that I heard. Anyway, thanks.
Do that here, it has to be sewed up, right? That's the Utah niche.
Well, I thought,
It is with the board.
yeah, I know. Well, and the thing is, I thought it could be, I don't know if community members would even be interested. And maybe I would just tell my parents, hey, why don't you meet me here and we'll just eat pie same time every month. So.
You know, the Harriman mayor does that with the people that work at home. He does it every Wednesday at a different business, and it's grown to be 50 or 60 people every week. It's huge. And I really think that's a great idea to kind of think about, is some way we can connect each month and, be available. But that's been a great thing. And a lot of good things have come out of that, good connections and such. So I think it's a great idea. I'm with it with pie. Sugar free though.
Sugar free.
A fruit.
I don't know about fruit and the board
water with
members,
the
but
board. Anthony will be right there.
That's
I meant
right.
Dr. Godfrey,
I'm
sorry.
all over it.
it should be
He loves
tacos
fruit water.
probably.
Dr. Godfrey.
Okay. Yeah, I always get something out of the conference, and it was fun to do those 2 presentations. Communications department did a great job. They did the bulk of the work, and then I got to step in and do my part. And as you've all said, they represented us really well. They did a great job. And we've been contacted by half a dozen people about doing a podcast with some specific questions. Several of them in state and several of them out of state, and so that's really been enjoyable to continue to spread the word on that.
And just on a presentation level, from all the presentations I went to, it really was the best. And setting aside that the people are great and the topic was great, just the presentation. I mean, it is so well done. They are so professional, and just multimedia and video clips and PowerPoint, and it's just engaging. So
Yeah.
really well done. And important to note too that NSBA invited us back. They
Yeah,
presented last year and they asked us to come back this year.
They
I'd,
did.
I'd like to see the presentation. I don't know why I felt like, well, I'm in the same district with this presenter. There's a chance that I could see it some other time. And so I'm hoping that someday.
Sorry, Lisa, you're out of luck.
One of the things that I really appreciated.
The others that weren't there would probably like to see it too.
You have the inside track. We can get that to you. Yes.
You'll be at the coffee shop, though.
Yeah, no, we'd be glad to share that with you. We also, I went to one about preschool and childcare as a means of jump-starting students' education and providing that for employees and the community as a side benefit, but students coming ready for school in ways that they weren't previously, and they talked about how they funded it and structured it. I thought that was very worthwhile. The student engagement was very interesting, although we try to do some things along those lines. There's more that we can do and more structured interaction that we can provide. Which, by the way, I would mention we have 2 students from our teacher prep program here who I spoke with today, and I know sometimes some of you have spoken with that group as well. Man, that was awesome. I just kept going, and then I was having so much fun. Finally, I had to go do other things, but I would have rather stayed. Anyway, it was great.
On that preschool one,
Yeah,
was it offering preschool as a district? Is that what it was?
they were offering it as a district.
Okay.
Yeah, and just how it kind of brought the community together, and how they we wouldn't do exactly what they did, but I wanted to learn more about kind of the funding. That was a group from Kansas, how they funded it, why they did it, how they approached it. So they really made it a huge community effort to make that possible, and they had some unique reasons for doing it, but they were able to find some good funding sources too. So I think that's a group that I can follow up with because they volunteered that. So I went to a presentation from Salt Lake City School District that involved former students about energy conservation and resource conservation in the district and some things that they've done along those lines. I went to one about how to pass bonds effectively. I learned how things work differently in other states. That's part of it, is you kind of get a different perspective on what we do because it's so different from what's described in some of the presentations.
Sizes of districts, it just changes it so much.
Right,
There are
Right.
issues where like, no, that's not our problem at all.
right. Yeah, it is very interesting. We're a very large district, even on a national level. And the other thing that happens just as you're at an event like that is that you have the opportunity to talk with people that you wouldn't talk with otherwise. I had a really interesting conversation. I can't remember who was with me. I mean, maybe it was Tracy. We ran into a couple of superintendents from Wyoming. One of them stopped me and said, education is the most important thing you'll do today, because he knew the podcast. So he's like, hey, recognized anyway. So we got to chat. It's fascinating how much money they spend per student. Their class sizes are half our class size because of the money that they have available from minerals and oil. And they just the things that they do and the way that they're structured. They have challenges though, and I learn a lot from those personal interactions as well. Interactions we had with districts after presentations. And there was a point where superintendents kind of have this magnetic draw to each other. We want to talk to each other. And there were about 15 superintendents from Utah who at one point were all talking about legislative questions and other things. And it was, we talked about some of the situations that our districts are in, and it was just very, very worthwhile. It was even kind of impromptu that we just kind of started to collect in the same area and were able to really exchange some ideas. So the same thing happens. I love the chance to travel with board members, and we have chance to have conversations that we don't always have the space for when we're here. So lots of valuable insight. So
there are still problems that wealthy districts have. In other words, no matter how much money you have, you're always going to have something that money isn't the solution for. Is that right?
as I enthused over their level of funding, I said, "Well, but I'm sure that you still have your struggles." Almost as well, I don't want to make it sound like everything's perfect. And then they started talking about the politics in their state and the way things are structured, and they were always respectful, but they definitely have their challenges still. So anyway, and it's what's interesting is a border state, they're able to recruit people out of our state to teach in Wyoming. And we asked, well, why did they go to Wyoming? They said, well, 15 students in a class. I'm like, okay, well, I understand.
Can beat with that.
Yeah. Anyway, but you're right. Money does not solve all of their problems.
Yeah.
Mr. Larson.
Once again, I really enjoy the breakout sessions that they offer. The general sessions, not so much.
Especially this year.
This year particular, but some of the breakout sessions I went to, of course, the two with Jordan School District were fantastic. I thought just did a wonderful job there representing the district and the state. I went to a couple classes on the different roles of the Board of Education and the superintendent. Some of you know that I go to those every year and enjoy that. And I did pick up, again, another book. I'm done with it, Tracy, so you can borrow it.
I get it next.
Okay.
Just for all of you that don't know, he usually buys books at NSBA and has a library of them. So if there's anything you're interested in, we can check it out from his library.
Have an
So I
online
brought-
catalog that
I brought
can-
them all here if you want to.
Your latest purchases.
Yeah. I went to 3 breakout sessions on school safety. 2 of them were really good. Sad but good. Informative. And I went to 2 sessions on, for lack of a better term, I might say going green in schools. One of them was put on by Salt Lake City School District, so I wanted to support them. Before the class, I did ask a few questions, and it was of note to me that their first step in doing this was putting canopies over their buses so that snow or weather did not inhibit their ability to roll the buses early in the morning. And then later, because they had the canopies, they threw electric panels on the canopies that now are running their electric bus fleet. So it was kind of a 2-phase thing. That was of interest to me due to the snow days. And then the 3 general sessions that I already talked about. It was good. I thought it was worthwhile. It was informative. Of course, there's things that, just like anything, wish could be improved upon, but it was good.
Were there other districts in Utah besides us and Salt Lake that presented?
Oh,
I think Park City was part of one presentation, but it was during the same hour that we were presenting, so I didn't get to see them. But it was nice. Districts came and supported our presentations, and that was fun.
One of my greatest takeaways from these conferences is that, wow, we really do a great job in our district. It's so interesting to talk to others. This one class I went to was Tools to Help a School Board Focus on Strategy and Planning. And this poor board and district they didn't even know what policies they had. They had no policy manual, none of their policies were online. So they were going through it, explaining this whole process of what they went through to figure out what their policies were and review them and get them online. I went, oh. But I actually did take away one thing from them. They were talking about the roles of committees, and each year each of their committees has a charter. So as a board, they've set the charter for what that committee is responsible for, and then the committee sets annual goals. So I thought we kind of did that once a few years back, but haven't done that recently. So that's something I've got on my radar maybe for the future, is when we start a committee at the beginning of the school year, the committee comes back and says, here's what we're going to accomplish, and the board agrees to that. I went to one on effective board communication. I think we do a really good job as a board, communicating and responding to people. This particular board had like a quarterly report that they pushed out. So one idea I had, I think my favorite class I went to was on teacher retention. And this was done at the state level. So the state of Kansas had done this whole big survey on teacher retention and on teacher engagement, because engagement is a precursor for retention. So they were doing it mostly on teacher engagement, and had just tons of great data and correlated it to which things actually drive engagement and retention and which things don't. And they would break it down for each school district so they could provide each school district their data, because it wasn't always the same for each school district within their state. And I would love something like that. I thought that would be so cool. The couple of the sample data that we looked at, the number one driver for engagement and retention is your relationship with your principal. So it's leadership. That's the number one factor for that particular district that we looked at, but it didn't surprise me. I think that's important. Another thing that they had correlated to engagement is actual Board of Education. Educators who have high satisfaction with their Board of Education are 25% more engaged than those who report low satisfaction. So satisfaction with us actually correlated to engagement, which I thought was interesting. One thing that didn't correlate to engagement or retention was being able to secure substitute teachers. I thought, because we've invested, a lot of money in making sure we have substitutes for our teachers, and that did not correlate for them. But again, every district is different, and I would love to have this set of data for our district to know what's driving engagement and retention in our district. So that's actually one takeaway that I've been thinking about, is doing a teacher survey within our district. Before I was on the board, I think there was an extensive one done just shortly before I got on the board. So that predates all of us then, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure what all that looked like, but I'd like to look into what that was and maybe discuss and consider if we want to do something as a board, to get some really good data about what's important to our teachers and what is actually correlated to how engaged they are and to retention. And then this group, they hadn't done their classified employees yet, but that was their plan, was next they were going to go through the same process for classifieds.
I think I understand teacher retention. What exactly does teacher engagement mean? What does that look like?
If they're engaged with their job and with their school and with their parents versus those that have just kind of checked out and are going through the motions. So
I went to that presentation too. It was very interesting to see the level of data they'd collected.
So that's a takeaway that I may bring back to the board. Went to a school safety one. It just talked a lot about the importance of training staff. And do we do safety training with our staff annually? Is that part of the insurances that teachers have to do?
Yes.
I thought. Okay. I went to one on Robert's Rules. which was really great because I think we do a great job of Robert's Rules when we're out in our business meeting and we follow it well. But I struggle in study session knowing, should we have a motion? Should we not have a motion? You know, how much of Robert's Rules do we follow when we're here in study session? And so this was really great for me because they had a whole section on in small groups and in study sessions. One thing I'd always been told is the chair can't make a motion. And according to Robert's Rules, if you're in small groups, which is less than 12 people, the chair can make a motion. So, woohoo. Yes. Also, we don't have to have a motion if someone makes a proposal and it's clear, we can vote on it. If it's not clear, motions are good because motions help clarify. Let's see. Maybe that was a helpful one. I really liked, so the closing keynote speaker I thought was very good. Adam Chair was his name. He is the guy that created Siri. And he created it, launched it on the App Store, and Apple called the next day and wanted to buy it, and he held off for about a month and eventually sold it to Apple. But he talked all about AI and the future of that in education, artificial intelligence. And that is something I've had a hard time wrapping my brain around. So that was really cool for me to hear all about AI and kind of the history of it and where it's going and what it's going to do with education. He said it will not replace teachers, but it will be something that we will need to embrace and need to use. It's like the internet. You know, the internet came along and completely changed education. He said artificial intelligence is like that. He also talked about it being like the calculator, because one of the questions is AI going to make students dumber? And he says, yeah, probably. But, and then he gave the example of the calculator. Now we can do all of our math on the calculator, so we don't have it all memorized. We're not using the slide rule anymore. But would we go back to the slide rule? No, we're happy with the calculator.
Autocorrect has made a lot of sloppy spellers.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, his thing was just embrace it, understand it. Eventually we're going to need policies for it. It's coming. It's the future. It was fascinating.
So I would also argue, though, that autocorrect has made good spellers. I remember when that was introduced in the mid to early 1990s, and everyone thought, oh no, nobody will ever be able to spell again. But with things like that and Grammarly, I actually think that I'm a better speller with it, and I write a lot better. The question is how to use the tool, and how are we going to use it? I saw one educator take Chat CPT or whatever that is, and put 3 paragraphs, had it create 3 paragraphs, but it created it slightly wrong in 2 of them. And so students had to decide which paragraph was correct and which one it wasn't. And I think that's what technology is going to force us to do, is create new ways of learning which can be better for us, you know. So anyways, I'm just grateful that WordPerfect put spell check in their product.
Yeah. So that is that. And again, just great appreciation for our district. And we've got a lot of great things going on here. And even in the state of Utah, we've got a lot of great things going on. I talked to board members actually from 2 different states that the budget gets voted on publicly, like on the ballot. Community votes on the budget.
Yeah, and at one of the classes I went to, there was one school district where one of the board members actively campaigned against voting for the budget.
Yeah.
So.
And then the budget got voted down, and so then it fell back to last year's budget. And there's interesting things around the country, for sure. Next year's conference is in New Orleans, April 6th through the 8th.
Is that confirmed?
I thought so too, but at the end of the closing session, they showed a video of next year's NSBA, and it was in New Orleans.
So funny that they changed it up, though.
Some people don't want to see the sun eclipse.
And it is April 6th through the 8th. Although the year after, there was some discussion about moving it off of a certain religious event in our community. And the year after, it will be moved off of that event.
I hope everybody added that to their survey.
And, oh, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Just another thing, Christy Sweat, who is on the Salt Lake School Board, is the new president of NSBA. So she started her term at this conference. So it is good to have Utah representation there. Okay, anything else anyone wants to bring up? And just, if you have ideas or things that you want to bring back and have an agenda item, you know, put some thought to it and want to bring it, just let us know and we'll add things to the agenda.
Can I do that now?
Yes.
Hearing your report, I read through Hattie's research recently, and Hattie says the greatest influence on the success of a student is the quality of the teacher in the classroom. And I've been pondering what is then perhaps one of the greatest influences on the success of the teacher. And I think Hattie's research, by extension, would argue perhaps one of the greatest influences on the success of a teacher is the quality of the principal in the building. And I am worried about our principals. I worry about their load. I worry about their lack of training to become a principal. I worry that we make the assumption that good teachers make good leaders, and that's not necessarily true. We don't provide leadership training. We just kind of leave it to them, and we are very lucky that we have some incredibly talented leaders, which I think they've had to do on their own because as a resource, we don't provide it. We're not tooled to provide it. We have put so much on their backs that if it's true that the success of teachers is influenced by the quality of the principal in the building, I think we need to draw more attention to the principals in our district, especially the principals of large schools. That was one of my priorities at the beginning of the year, and I would echo that again. I worry about our principals.
So is there something specific on that? And correct me if I'm wrong, they have to get an administrative license and go through all sorts of training before they can become principals. And we do provide leadership training as a district.
We've actually, I share the focus on providing great support to principals so they can provide great support to teachers. And we have the Deloitte training that I emailed the board about that we send principals to this year. So every principal will go through that leadership training. So, and we actually met yesterday about an extension of that training. So it's a topic of concern. There are things, just for those listening, there are some very concrete things that we're doing, but that's not an argument against the need to continue to focus on providing great training and support for a very difficult job.
I guess the concern is what more can we do, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I don't fault the superintendent for doing what he can do with the resources provided. I just wonder as a board if we need to reallocate some of the resources we provide.
I've talked to a lot of principals lately, and they've appreciated this board and what we've taken off their plates. We put vice principals in every elementary school and psychologists and counselors there, and they say their job is night and day. So we could do more. I'm excited. I was a school principal for a day a couple of years ago at Foothills Elementary, and I'm going to go do it again now. As we've made those changes, and I don't think we're perfect, and I think that Bryce makes a good point. I think that we need to focus on that and continue to work on that. The burnout for principals just got to be incredible. I don't even know how they can do it. Every time I go and work close to a principal, I just realize that that's not a job I ever want to do. But I do think that as we've taken things off teachers' plates, we've also taken things off principals' plates. Probably not enough, but we have done some.
Then at the same time, we've added things to principal's plate.
You're probably exactly right.
So the net result is still the same load.
Well, I was just wondering if we're. I was just thinking, it wasn't on the agenda. You asked if we could put what we would like to put on the agenda. Are we discussing this now, or are we moving?
Future agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's things you want for future agenda items, speak up or just contact executive committee.
And I think not only do we always need to be thinking about what more we can do, but what we do is not very public, and what we need to do next does require a conversation with the board. So I like the idea of talking more about that.
Okay, great. Our next agenda item is board and superintendent reports and comments. Facilities committee. Anything besides you already kind of reported?
I reported, yes.
Okay, finance.
Finance meets next week.
Government relations.
We have an upcoming meeting as well.
Okay. Joint relations. Have they met? Daryl?
No.
Okay, GIAC.
So I went to the meeting last week, and superintendent was there also, and it was really good. We talked about the parent open house, and I should say we, because I'm on the committee now, we're doing a book review, a book called Street Data, and we also talked about some different scenarios and how teachers and schools could provide more equity and just emotional safety for students. And also, I do have a meeting tomorrow with the Parks and Rec Board. I didn't see it on the committee thing, but I have a meeting tomorrow with that.
Okay, JPAC is done for this year, right?
Yes.
LEAC. is coming
LEAC
up.
meets on the 18th, and again, I would extend an invitation to anyone, administration and board, who can come and be a listening ear for me. We have two assignments. They have two assignments. How is the rollout of the package that was approved by the board this year? What effect are you seeing in your class or your building? What suggestions would you make to the board? And then the second one is, what ideas do you have to deal with the ESP shortages? So after a brief presentation from myself and the superintendent, we're going to break into study sessions and then just listen. So I need as many listening ears as possible. The more listening ears, the smaller the groups and the more opportunity for each person to speak. And so I'd be happy to put, Mike and John and Anthony or anyone who could, since you're not necessarily representing the board. I just need a listening ear. So as many people as could come, I would invite you to come. We have changed the start time. It is a 4:15 start and not a 4 o'clock start. It's a 4:15 to 6 on April 18th.
Has that date been sent out?
Yes.
And Bryce, could you have a list of discussion questions, just in case people don't have something to say, anyway, like the ones you just said, thank you.
I have emailed every member of LEAC multiple times with that list. I've provided them with an audio version of the superintendent's presentation in March of last year. I provided the PowerPoints he presented, so they will have heard the assignment numerous times. As we've identified, there's a couple stragglers. We've had a couple additions where a school didn't identify a LEAC rep. I just did one 2 days ago, so I sent that LEAC rep all of the information. They should not come unprepared. They have been told many times what the topic is. Anthony?
John and I are in St. George that day on our superintendent meeting, and Mike is not available either.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Great. We'll do what we can. The more people we have, the smaller the groups. The fewer people we have, the larger the groups, but we'll do our best.
We got board members planning to be there.
I carbon copied all of you on that last email that went out when we rescheduled it, so hopefully you saw that and changed that on your calendar. Okay. I can
I'll
handle
see
it.
if I can leave the state meetings early, maybe miss part of that second day.
If
I
not,
can.
I mean, I don't want you to stress over that because I just wanted them to hear from you why these changes were important to you, and then I want to stand up and say, you need to understand the credence we put in what he requests. We're grateful for everyone else, and we take that very seriously, but when the superintendent comes to the board and says, this is what we need to take things off teachers' plate, that is the direction this board goes. And so my presentation is really just to say, thank you, but let's not criticize the superintendent's plan. Let's simply talk about its implementation and where we can do better to implement it. That was my attempt to say, we're not here to criticize the superintendent's plan. We are here to improve its rollout. That's all I want to talk about. I wanted to be very clear where this board stands as far as a superintendent's recommendation to the board.
Thank you.
That's LEAC.
Okay, JLC has not met recently. The foundation, Thursday night is the awards banquet, and you got an email for that. You need to RSVP ASAP if you can respond to that tonight if you're going.
I responded and it never made it there. So don't use the address that's on the website.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't like addressed anywhere, so I just looked it up.
I just called her number and left a voicemail.
That was smart of you. They had that nice little envelope and card, so I was like, okay, I'll follow directions, but I didn't.
That'll be a great event. Always so good. And then if you would like to mark your calendars for May 13th, it is the challenge run. And that is at 9 in the morning at West Jordan Park. And registration for that is open if you're interested in participating, bringing kids, neighbors, family members. It's $20 a person. Teachers get to participate for free, and all that money goes towards the classroom grants that the foundation funds.
Can I ask a question? Because I had a question.
Okay.
How far is this run?
It is an obstacle course.
That's what I said. My son, who is very fit, I said, hey, you want to do this? And he said, how far is it? And I said, well, it's obstacle course. I mean, he wants to do it.
It's a personalized obstacle course where you're able to leave the course and return to the finish line at whatever point you choose.
It's as far as you want it to be.
I will be acting as DJ once again, so you can come back to the classic tunes by the finish line anytime you wish.
You can get muddy
So I
or
can be
not
the
get
last
muddy.
Get as
leave
muddy
first
or
day
not
back.
as you want. It's personalized.
And it's a Veterans Memorial Park.
At 9 a.m. And registration is open for that now.
By volunteering to DJ, I do not have to get muddy or decide how much of the race I want to complete. I always have a job, and that's the job I do.
Feels like a challenge.
This has the best swag of any race I've ever been to.
It's a great race. It is a great race. They do a good job. It's a Saturday.
Yes. Okay, PTA.
PTA will be coming to our next general meeting to talk about some PTAs that have earned their awards from PTA. Anyways, a conversation that I wanted to kind of float past the board was I'm curious if you have any interest in creating a way that we could recognize our PTAs a little. So the idea that I had, and this is certainly not necessarily the best idea, but I was thinking about how we have the little plaques outside of most offices where we list like Teacher of the Year. and that stays out there. I wondered if it would be something we would be interested in, creating some sort of acknowledgement for the efforts of our PTAs. Just a little plaque that we can add like a small tile to every year. So it's not like rebuying a plaque every year, but just adding a tile if a PTA has earned their award.
I'm open to doing something like that and then recognizing them as a board.
Yeah, I think that would, I feel like we cannot emphasize enough the benefit that they bring to our schools, and this would be a really small way for us to shine a little bit of light on what they do.
I think that even something like a SWIG gift card would be appreciated, something with the recognition. Do schools feel good about having the PTA plaque there? Probably. And it would say like 2022 and the award that they got, or
Yeah, that's
okay.
what I pictured.
Okay.
But again, like that was just my first thought. I'm open to anything. I think, Tracy, you can probably correct me on this, but I think generally when they come and do the presentation to the board, they do bring a small gift for those that receive an award from the PTA. It's not a gift from us, but I just thought, I don't know. It was an idea that crossed my mind. Like, it's difficult for PTAs to self-nominate and have to say, look at what we've done this year. And that really is how they get these awards. And I would like there to be a way that we can say, we acknowledge that effort and we're so grateful.
So the plaque would be for those schools that are getting the award
Yeah.
from Utah PTA.
So we wouldn't have to like go out and get one for every school, but just like add one as schools earn them.
And because I know there are a lot of different types of awards PTAs can get, like if every faculty member joins the PTA. So would it just say state award or state awards and then the year, or would there be stickers for each award, or am I getting too detailed about this?
That would be a detail we would want to figure out. I mean, if there's interest, then I can start looking at like how many characters can go on a tile and what could we include. But
South Valley does those. South Valley does those plaques, if you want to check there.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. They make the plaques.
Would it be more meaningful to the PTA at the individual schools if they had kind of a, maybe a contribution to their fundraiser for that year instead of a plaque? How meaningful is the plaque? I mean, it could be, but I'm just wondering if maybe some kind of a contribution toward their fundraiser for that year in the name of their award or whatever. I don't know, just an idea.
That's a good idea.
Dollars to donate
I don't know,
to PTA
that was just something
fundraisers.
that came to my mind. I know they're always scrambling for their fundraisers, always.
Okay, thoughts. And who's interested in doing a plaque? I'm open to it.
I'm open.
Okay.
I just think of I mean, it sounds silly, but like sometimes PTAs will print off a little certificate. You've reached 40 hours of volunteer or whatever. And like, it means something to those PTA members. And I think this would be a way for us they don't work for pay, but I think a little acknowledgement could go a long way.
Visual representation.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's people in favor of it if you want to look into it.
Okay.
That'd be great. Okay, Salt Lake Academy Board.
We don't have anything.
Utah High Schools Activities Association.
Yeah, I have just 2 items really quickly. We have, with the new realignment, one 5A school, and they're having 5A elections for the representative on the Board of Trustees.
Oh, I got an email for that.
Yeah.
Someone campaigning.
Right, you did, and also, I don't know if I'm supposed to bring up names. There's another one from Canyons District who is very passionate about this. So I plan on attending that elections meeting, and I wanted to know if you want me to vote for the board or the district, or how you want to approach that.
Explain that. You get a vote as a,
We get one vote because we have one 5A school.
oh, okay.
That make sense?
You're voting for the person.
Right, it's mid-year, it's mid-term, but, yeah, we need a 5A rep.
I'm great if you vote on our behalf. Just one.
I would listen to their presentations, of course, both of the candidates. There may be more, I don't know. But two of the candidates I know, and I would listen to their presentations and vote accordingly if that's appropriate.
With that,
I'm good with that too, Marilyn. I think that, yeah, Ms. Richards, I think, I trust your vote.
Me too.
Well, a lot more than I do.
Okay,
Make a better choice than I would, so.
thank you. The other thing is, and this was a big presentation at our last meeting, esports is still well and alive throughout the state. And we had a presentation from kind of the chair of the esports committee, and apparently the executive committee voted yes to sanction esports. We have the final vote on the Board of Trustees, and we voted no. And the reason being is because the details were still not crystal clear and hadn't been worked out. There's a lot of iffy things that need to be ironed out, and so we chose to maybe visit that again in November, and then we'll talk about that. Of course, it'll mean a lot of changes in the schools, and unfortunately, esports is mostly right now males.
It's mostly what?
Males
For Title IX.
rather than female. Yeah, although that is building, and they're trying really hard to build that.
open to both. They don't have boys teams and girls teams, right?
Correct.
There's
It's-
teams
it's
and
not-
any
it's
gender
not-
can join.
Allocated just for boys. No, it's both, and so that would be good. But we're going to visit that again in November, and they're forming a committee to research this a little bit more so we have a better understanding.
Are they providing any kind of estimates on cost?
Not yet. That's what the committee will do, because it would mean uniform, some kind of a shirt or something for. Yeah, it'll cost money for sure. Equipment.
That's what I was thinking.
Equipment,
Yeah, all the
although
infrastructure
they
needed
do
for that.
have sponsors that they work with. Ken Garf being one, and there are several others.
It's
So-
concerning to me on how fast some groups get sanctioned and how slow other groups get sanctioned.
These esports have been going for several years, trying to get things going. So it's been several years. It hasn't been just this year by any means.
But lacrosse worked on it for a decade or more. And so, I know esports has not been around at the large level that it
I think
has.
lacrosse broke the barrier for it.
It's
Esports takes a
never
lot
broken
less
it.
space. I mean, you don't have to share a field and
however,
different types and smaller
it does
Yeah, it's costly.
require coaches.
Yeah.
It
And
does
administrative
require
time.
administrative
That's my
time,
biggest
has to be
concern.
supervised, et cetera, et cetera.
And
So we're
it
looking at
is
that.
a sport.
And it
It
is a
is a
sport.
Does count as a sport.
Yes, it does. Actually, they're putting it in the category of drama, theater, music,
An
activity type thing, yeah. At least that's where they left it. It
Till a
might
lawsuit
change.
changes that.
Marilyn, I got a concern. Can you bring up? I'm concerned with the number of games that have canceled this spring. So one of my big problems with the Utah High School Activities Association is their inflexibility in the state championship games and the number of times they require students to make a choice to go to graduation or to go to their event. And it's frustrating to me that any student should be put in that situation. Several years ago, Harriman High, their softball team, was playing the state championship on the same day of graduation. Luckily, the times were different enough that all the students went to the game, and then they were able to go to the graduation. And I wish that the association would acknowledge that changing a game time when just two schools are involved is more important, because they're not just making those kids that they can't go to the graduation, but they're making every student and every parent and that whole community not be able to go to the championship.
And they've made a concerted effort to check that out before scheduling games, Daryl.
I haven't seen it, and so
It hasn't happened the last,
A little bit happening
it
recently.
hasn't happened
yes,
recently.
It has, and it's happened in the Granite School District, who graduates a week early. One of the reasons why I'm always a proponent of having our graduation later is because of that.
Yeah.
And Granite District deals with it on a regular basis. And so
Well, let's just
I
say,
think this year it's going to come up because of the number of games that have been postponed. But this would be a great year for them to say, hey, let's make that work. Let's change that state championship game by a few hours or
I'll
whatever.
bring it up at the next meeting, but I know they've made a concerted effort to check that out. Where you're working with so many different districts,
It's a difficult thing,
it's-
but
it's horrible.
when you get down to championship, it's two schools. And it seems to me you could look at both their graduations. Is there a conflict? Oh, there is a conflict. Can we adjust the time a little bit to make it, after graduation or before graduation, just not at the same time?
yeah. A lot of times it's being able to get the venue.
But they
Changed?
probably have the venue scheduled for the day, you would imagine.
You're saying probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that that's always the case, but I will bring it up.
Okay. There's enough venues to change if we need to. Thank you. It's a pet peeve of mine.
I know. I can tell.
All right, I don't have anything from Utah School Boards Association. We have a meeting next week. We'll be talking about the strategic plan. Okay, maybe I will just say something about that then. The focus on Utah School Boards Association has really been towards building better boards and training board members. But there's been a lot of talk lately that we should be stronger on advocating for public schools and how to get a stronger voice and being proactive with legislation. So we're going to be looking at the strategic plan next week and at our meeting and determining if we want to make changes to that. That's good to hear. Okay, Parks and Rec, I left off. Is there anything else that's been left off of this list? Did you have something?
I was prepared to make a motion.
Whoa.
Or, oh, not yet. I got a couple more things to get to first before that.
Parks and Rec.
I
This
kind of
is
wanted
not-
to hear Tracy make that motion.
This isn't really a committee report, but can I just bring up a item that I noticed? So while I was at NSBA, we had the thought kept occurring to me that there's so much value to being together at a conference and being able to receive some of those maybe not built-in consequences that benefit our board. So I really enjoy going to NSBA, but I became really curious about a lot of the other conferences that are happening that are more specific to some of our work. So, for example, if you were serving on government relations committee, you might be interested in some advocacy conferences or something like that, just as an example. And so I started to ask, as you do, like Dr. Godfrey talked about, I just became curious and started to ask other board members as we were traveling, do you go to other conferences? How is that accomplished? And most of them do attend more than NSBA. And I was just curious if there is any interest among our board in maybe expanding that educational opportunity for our board members. Maybe it doesn't have to be, it could be, any related content that interests you, but I think it would be beneficial to look at our committee work in ways that we could become more well-rounded and educated in that work through education opportunities. So just curious what your thoughts are.
I would be interested in going to specific type conferences.
What's the benefit? And maybe I know the answer to this already, but I'd just like to hear. Why is going to a conference, flying, first of all, the expense, and the time, why is that better than reading content available online on a particular topic?
And I should say, I'm not saying it couldn't be a virtual conference, but
Or a local one.
yeah, or a local conference. I didn't mean to limit it in that way, but I think for me, there is the matter of like attention. When I am in my house, I'm a mom and I am a neighbor and I am a board member and I am a teacher and I wear a lot of hats. And when I'm at NSBA, I am a board member. And I take very seriously the responsibility of knowing that a taxpayer put me there. And so I try to absorb as much of that experience as I possibly can. So I do see benefit. For me personally, I don't know if that is shared by others.
I'll answer. I have never been to a conference where the material presented couldn't have been found online in greater abundance and more effective. But the connections I made with the people who attended the conference is what made it valuable. So if you go to a conference, the material is not the reason you're going there. The reason you're going is to connect with people doing just what you're doing, dealing with the same challenges you're dealing with, and they're going to be able to share ideas that will bless your life. It's the people you'll connect with there that makes it worth going to.
Or it's being able to go up to their class after it's over with and ask them more specific questions.
And there has been some major things our district has done as a result of this conference. The least of much is the mental health initiatives that we developed, but there's far more than that.
I just keep going back to that study that I referenced earlier, that when you have a higher knowledge base, then you can do more work. And I think that it's true. If I know about a specific issue, I can go and research it, absolutely. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know until it's presented in front of you. And that was a valuable piece of NSBA for me this year. And it has been the last 2 years that I've been able to attend.
I like the precedence as well. When a board says, we are going to do everything we can to improve in our station, in our position, I'm going to lift better at my spot. I think there's an expectation that trickles down to everyone in the organization that says, look, I want to improve in my position. I invite you to improve in yours. I think you just create that expectation that says, we all need to improve. We're all doing a good job, but we all need to get better at what we do.
So if someone in our district is concerned about the board spending money, sending us around the country, as opposed to just getting the information, like Bryce mentioned, it's available for free. What we tell them is we're more focused when we're there. We can focus. We can create connections that we couldn't online. We can interact personally, ask specific questions. Those are some things. Those are some of the benefits of the money that we're spending, right?
And besides that, just a revitalization of you. I think it just helps you to refresh everything and just get going again. And I think it just gives you a start that you need.
And we're not unique to other elected officials. Our city officials do this. Our legislators go to conferences, and you know, it's part of the professional development of being a public leader.
But I do think we need to take the money piece very seriously. And I think there would need to be parameters on that, you know, or limits to the number or the amount or how often travel can be involved.
Yeah.
In a public report like we just did, we spent well over an hour discussing what we learned.
And I think it needs to be a board member's decision. It's a wasted experience if you go because you must, and so use it or don't use it. Whatever fits your theory of approaching board work and whatever your needs are, I think.
We made a decision a couple years ago that if there is a convention you'd like to attend, you seek executive committee approval. I would still stand by that. You seek that gives you 3 board members plus yourself to weigh in on whether or not they think that's a valuable expense and an opportunity for you. So that was the decision we made, is you seek executive committee approval.
I thought that was in place of NSBA.
That was the
Am I
decision.
wrong?
That was the decision we made, but the precedence was seek. And I think what was stated at that meeting is, if there's ever anything that you're interested in, that's the same procedure we would put in place.
Do you want to leave it at that? Or do you want to put together some sort of parameters for board members?
I had proposed years ago that we assign a budget item for board improvement, and that there was a dollar amount given to each board member. And to say, look, if you don't go to USB, you may use those dollar amounts and these other opportunities. When I didn't attend USB, USBA, I reached out to the superintendent and say, could I buy this book? It would really benefit me in my board work. And it was kind of like, let me take that out of my budgeted funds. So we've never done that. We do have a general budget item, but I would be in favor of creating the expectation that each board member has X number of dollars for your board improvement. Spend it wisely or return it to the district if it's unused. But this is for your board improvement.
I found that was the approach many of the board members I spoke to from around the nation took. They have a budget amount, they use it. It's not theirs if they don't use it, but it seems to create some parameters.
Are there any conferences in Maui?
Oh my
There is one in
gosh.
Cupertino.
The legislators went to one in Hawaii last year. I
Yeah.
saw lots of social media posts on that one.
What's the weather in Cupertino? I wonder how we can figure that
sunny.
out.
Oh, Apple controls the weather in Cupertino, so.
We can bring it
I'm
back
gonna
later if there's
propose
interest.
executive committee discuss this and bring back a proposal. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. Okay. Land trust plans. Mr. Anderson, we got emails. Do you want to give us our marching orders? Dr. Anderson.
Can I
But,
do a quick report before Dr. Anderson moves on to weightier issues?
Yes.
I just want to thank everyone who made adjustments because of the snow day. While it makes me wildly popular with students, 3 of whom in my neighborhood cleared my driveway as a thank you. I know that it places a difficulty on parents and employers and specifically our employees, our teachers, our staff. There's a lot of hard work clearing the snow. There's a lot of work adjusting. And I just really appreciate how everyone jumps in and makes the best of difficult situations, especially when we set records and have a virtual day after spring break, for crying out loud. But it's anyway.
7 days later, it's 80 degrees.
I know. I appreciate everyone jumping in on what seems like something that just couldn't possibly have happened when it did. But and then the other thing quickly is that I emailed board members to let you know that we now have confirmation that there's adequate funding to provide full-day kindergarten in every one of our elementary schools, and there's space to provide it in every one of our elementary schools. And we're now evaluating the space available to expand beyond just one session, and we'll be doing that in schools as well based on space available and parent interest. So we'll continue to expand that effort throughout the spring, and we're excited about that. I think great things will happen as a result. So thank you to the legislature for making that possible, and to USBE for advocating for that very important funding.
So are all parents of kindergartners being notified of how to apply, or
Yes,
at least express their interest?
yes.
And are we still operating under the expectation that it's kind of extra and that there will always be a half-day option for those who choose it? Are we eliminating the half-day option?
We're required to provide a half-day option if parents choose it, but you don't have to provide a separate session just for those who want half-day. In the rare school where we have all full-day kindergarten in some of our Title IX schools, there are a handful of parents who may choose to have their child come home halfway through the day, but it's not a special half-day session. So we adjust to parent needs, whether it's full day, as much as we have space for, or half day, whether it's a half-day session or whether they are only there for a portion of the day.
So every elementary school will have at least one, am I correct?
That's right.
And will you get us some kind of a list or update that for us? I know you gave us one not too long ago, but apparently it's going to change. Is that right?
Every school will have one session, and some will have multiple sessions. And as we get that final list, then I'll share that with you as well, so you know
Like-
which schools have
That's what I'd like.
additional sessions beyond that.
Thank you.
And I'll let you know, to your earlier question, I'll let you know which ones have gone to all full day. That's going to be fairly rare because of the space difficulty that we have at many of our schools, but there's space at every school for one.
Is the funding ongoing, or are we going to face a future problem in a few years to maintain this? Is the burden going to shift to us?
It's ongoing, and it's now folded into the FTE calculation. So it's just like a first grade or a second grade student at this point. There's a little bit of cost in transitioning from the way we funded it to the way it will be funded, but the funding is ongoing. It's not a grant, or it's not a question from year to year at what level that will be funded. So that's really exciting news. It's very helpful.
Is kindergarten, it's optional from the state's
Kindergarten is optional.
perspective?
That's right.
Okay.
And you cannot enroll in kindergarten unless you meet the birthday requirements, so you can't register someone who's 4 years old. So there are still some restrictions around it, but it is optional. So no kindergarten, half day, or for as many as we can accommodate, full day. That's the range of options available to parents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just briefly, I think every one of you should have received a folder, a Google folder in your drive that has all the land trust plans as we've done in years past. As a reminder, each school's land trust plan will be reviewed and approved by two to board members. And then between now and the next board meeting, if you could get those, take a look at those and open those. You can open, each school has their folder, and inside you'll find their plan, you'll find their school community council signature page, you'll find a page that you can add questions and comments. We included a guide, if you will, that President Miller put together years ago. Is very helpful, and we found to be very useful in just kind of guiding and directing what you should be looking for in the plans. I just want to give a shout out to my administrative assistant Nadine Page, who puts these plans, compiles them in the folders and scrutinizes each plan in great detail, and just appreciate her work on this as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us between now and next board meeting. And thanks for your work in getting that turned around.
Those are due April 21st.
Correct.
Friday.
If you need some extra time, we can. Nadine likes to make sure she has enough time to get things taken care of, but I'm flexible.
Nadine's been very patient with all my questions.
She's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate
And feel
it.
free to keep them coming.
April 21st.
We're supposed to be finished reviewing them by April 21st, and then they'll be on the agenda to vote
Correct.
at our board meeting on
Yeah.
April 25th.
Need to approve the land trust plans so that we can send them to the state. So that's how the schools get their funding. Next board meeting.
Okay, the last item I had was parades. Is there interest in participating in city parades as a board this year?
I'm more of a recluse, so I would rather not, but I will if the board wants to.
You could ride your tractor.
I could ride my tractor. There you go.
Yeah, I didn't get much interest.
Well, we can do our own if we want, right?
Yes. Done in a campaign year. I think you've done in a campaign year before.
I've done it in every year.
What do you do when you do it, Daryl? You just walk and throw candy?
Otter Pops are way more likable than candy.
But they're harder to throw.
They're harder
Yeah,
to
and
throw.
they break.
And they melt.
They don't melt when I do it. We have it down to science. Thank you, Julie King from the Alpine School District, for teaching this valuable lesson to me.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not interested in a board doing it this year. Okay. All right, does anyone have any other reports or comments? All right, I will take a motion now.
Now, Lisa.
I move we go into closed session
Or
for character and competence of individuals, property, negotiations, potential litigation, and security.
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion to go into closed session for character and competence of individuals, property, potential litigation, negotiations, and security. A motion by Ms. Dean, second by Ms. Richards. Roll call vote. Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Ms. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Dunford.
Yes.
And I am a yes. That motion passes unanimously. We'll now go into closed session. Thank you, everyone.